It's probably a story that's been around for a while about a group of 4-year-olds who were gathered in a Sunday school class in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the teacher looked at the class and asked the question, does anybody know what today is? Easter. Thank you. So this was the week before. So they would have said, this is Palm Sunday. And the teacher said, that's great, that's wonderful. Now does anybody know what next Sunday is? And the same little girl raised her hand just like you did and said, it's Easter. And once again the teacher said, well, that's great. Does anybody know what makes next Sunday Easter? And the same little girl responded and said, next Sunday is Easter because Jesus rose from the grave. And before the teacher could congratulate her, she kept on talking and said, but if he sees his shadow, he has to go back in for 7 weeks. Yeah. We're through that. So I'm starting a sermon series today. I'm taking vacation time, and then we'll be back and invite you. And it's entitled Jesus Out of the Box. And we're going to look at the ways that we as a church and we as people, we're going to focus on the way that we can be out of the box people of faith. We're going to ask questions such as what makes for a radically passionate, intentional, risk-taking, extravagant life? What makes for a radical, passionate, intentional, risk-taking, extravagant person of faith? So come along for the ride. But it seems to me this is the greatest place to stop because you can't get more out of the box than expecting to see someone dead and discover instead that he is alive, that he is risen.
He is risen indeed.
He's better, very yeehaw in there too, man. I mean, are you kidding me? How unexpected was that? How unexpected is that for us today? It wasn't part of the formula. It was 100% surprising for the disciples to discover that he wasn't dead. Now there are those of us, or those who will tell us rather, that to be a disciple, you've got to apply this correct formula for believing and behaving in a certain way, and then you can live with nothing but certainty throughout your life. But I think there is a better truth. That being a person of faith doesn't mean that you get certainty all the time. Or maybe sometimes get it at all. Because I think faith is recognizing that when something is not expected, something is not the formula you anticipated, when something is a 100% surprise, then maybe it's possible that it's the work of God. The work of God. But those unexpected places, those surprises we didn't anticipate, those unpredictable experiences, it feels like there's no security there. It's a little bit anxiety producing. It's not a comfortable place. It kind of gets our knickers in a twist when we go to those places, doesn't it? And that's a narrative that we're often fed or reinforced in the culture. I mean, all you got to do is watch the news and see the variety of change that's just rummaging through our culture and our world and discover, because we can be everywhere in a moment's time with live news feed of whatever's happening. It's no wonder the predictable and safe and secure seems such a long way off. And we can't see it. Because we're caught up in this narrative that life is changing. And it's unstable and it's unpredictable, and there's fear and uncertainty in that experience. And they saw it 2 centuries ago. Just a week ago, they were celebrating Palm Sunday. Woo-hoo, the Master's here, the Messiah's here. There was excitement. 5 days later, the one they believed in the most was crucified. And they were hiding from fear of being pointed out and known, wondering what happens to us now. It all looks so sure. Or maybe we recall the story of some evil-intentioned man who walks up to a Jewish community center with a gun and shoots people because he believes they are Jews. But instead, two of the people we discover were not Jewish at all. They were there for some acting theater group. And they're both Christians. One is a son and one is the grandfather of the son. And in fact, they're members of the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection in Kansas City. But we see that, we hear that, and it feeds this narrative. Holy cow. And sometimes as it keeps getting fed and we don't listen to other more true narratives, it takes on a life of its own. I remember years ago listening to Paul Harvey. I hope that doesn't date me. But it's a story that stood with me. And I'm not sure I'm hearing it correctly, but the power of it is the same. And he talked about how sometimes what we say takes on a life of its own. He talked about a man that went to one of those decades-old diners that probably hadn't changed in decades and ordered a meal. And while he's waiting for the waitress to come, he sees a paper in the corner. He picks it up on the front page. The stock market is crashing. Millions of dollars are being lost in the market. And before he even orders his meal, he calls up his broker and he says, I want to pull out of my investments and put it in the safe securities because I just read the news and it says the market is crashing. And even before the broker could interrupt him, turns off his phone. Sorry. So the broker calls the contractor who's going to do renovation work on his house and he says, man, people are getting anxious. I'm not sure I'm going to have the money for this. And so I want to cancel the renovation until it's a better day. And he cancels the renovation. The contractor calls his supplier and says, my gosh, I got a guy pulling money. He's a stockbroker. I need to cancel my orders for the work I'm going to do because I'm not sure I'm going to have the money to pay for it. And the supplier calls the manufacturer and says, I want to cancel our orders because someone just canceled on me. And he's worried that there's not going to be enough money. And it goes on and on and on. So the man is sitting in that booth and he's thinking about what he's going to do. And he looks back over at this yellow paper he had thrown into the corner. And he looks at the date and it said October 29th, 1929. Which was the day of the Great Depression. That's what it was, right? Stock crash. It was an old paper lying around. And isn't that what happens sometimes? We get caught in these stories and they start to take on a life of their own. And they don't just affect us here, they affect us here. And we become a little bit more withdrawn, a little bit more harsh, a little bit less loving, a little bit less compassionate, a little bit or a lot less generous. But Easter, this Resurrection Day, is about a powerfully real and true narrative weaved into very creation itself. Today, the sunrise, if you got to the sunrise today, we were after the sunrise. The sun was up, thank God, because it warmed us up. But I looked, the sunrise was breaking through the night. And when you see the light piercing the darkness, you know that another voice is being spoken for us. And it is the most true narrative of all, that the life and death of Jesus, God has overcome even death, and the grave is overwhelmed. The victory is won. He is risen from the dead. He is risen.
He is risen.
Okay, that's about half of you. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Thank you. Jesus surprises us out of the box. Now there's a branch of Christian theology called process theology. And one of the thinkings of process theology, as it tells us about the nature of God, is that in essence, God has what they call creative, responsive love. That it is God's nature to be creative. It is God's nature to bring things to life that are novel and new and innovative. And they even posit that by some way in which the Spirit works or God works, every new thought, every new novel idea is influenced by the very creative presence of God, even when we don't know it. It's kind of God baked in the creation at even the most deepest levels. And it posits that which is new, that which is novel, that which is renewing, that which calls and leads us into transformation, that which brings us to new life, that which helps us find life even in the misery and pain of death, that which brings life out of death and life through death, is God's creative love always at work in your life and mine and into creation. Always. Always. And then there's the responsive love of God. And what they assert is that God takes our moments and our decisions, our experiences, and those moment-to-moment experiences and decisions of our lives. God takes the cards we play, if you will, and the decisions we make and responds to them in a unique and novel way. In each moment of our decision-making, God is actively, creatively responding in love to renew us, to re-engage the novel, to bring us back into the balance and grace of God. No matter how far we run, God is still running close to us, helping us rework those decisions in ways that lead to life, abundant life, eternal life. God responds with creative love, bringing hope from despair, joy from sadness, and life from death. And I invite you to open your heart to that narrative. Because I believe, not just because I'm a pastor, I wrestle with this all my life, that is the truest narrative there is in the world and the creation in which we live. That doesn't mean death, heaven, stay, or chaos, or difficult experiences. I can't even imagine what the families of the people who went down in the Malaysian airliner are feeling now because they have no closure. No way of really saying goodbye. But the resurrection means that God's story is seldom over, even when we think it is. Or as African American preachers will say, don't go putting a period where God intended a comma. Right? So don't assume you already know how the story goes. That's what's cool about God. Be surprised. And don't be afraid. Be surprised by empty tombs. Be surprised by the thing you never saw coming, because there's God in there. Be surprised by how you can have something or someone taken from you which you thought you could never live without, and then finding yourself living without them anyway. Be surprised by your sobriety. Be surprised that people really do love you. Embrace it. Be surprised that you can tear up when you're having communion or you're sitting around tables and someone's washing their hand with a bowl and a towel on a Thursday night. Be surprised that you can actually have a relationship with your body that is not adversarial anymore. And be surprised that the relationship you thought was dead is not, and that. Be surprised because everybody does not hate you. Be surprised most of all by empty tombs. By God saying, I'm not done with you. And don't cling to what you think is the end. Instead, reach high and cling to what may be actually a new beginning emerging out of that darkest moment of your life. Because God is God of creation and creative and responsive love. Jesus has overcome. He's risen from the grave. The victory is won. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.